Here's what Zoro is going to do after becoming the undisputed king of sharp metal. So the first stop on the Zoro success train is a stupidly obvious one, which is to then make Luffy the Pirate King. Mihawk said that becoming the Pirate King is even more difficult than defeating him, and part of why Zoro now strives to become the world's greatest swordsman is so that he can use that power to make Luffy the Pirate King, which has interesting implications for the final saga. Because if Mihawk is Zoro's final opponent, then Mihawk has to stand directly in Luffy's way, meaning that our sword boy would have to throw his full support behind Buggy and Crossguild. Or Zoro becomes the world's greatest swordsman and his final fight is him defending that title against, say, Shiryu, the nominated sword boy of the Blackbeard Pirates. Whichever way it goes, let's say we succeed, Luffy becomes the Pirate King, then does that other thing he wants to do that we're not quite sure of yet. But after that, what next? The Straw Hats will eventually disband, although I think the word eventually isn't the most appropriate. Much like the sudden announcement from Roger, I think that Luffy will disband the crew very abruptly the moment that his dream is fulfilled. And at that stage, I think that one of the first things that Zoro is going to do is return to Shimotsuki Village in East Blue. And along the way, it would be great if he could stop in at Shellstown for a brief reunion with Rika, the girl that Zoro saved from Helmeppo's wolf. Maybe she'll treat him to some rice balls that she's perfected over the years. And so Zoro will take one bite and say, "It tasted better when you used dirt, kid." I, Zoro, love me some dirt. And I think another mandatory stop would be Kokoyashi Village, because that's where Johnny and Yosaku now live permanently, and I would feel a bit robbed if they didn't get to fawn over their Aniki one last time. But then it's on to Shimotsuki Village. After becoming the world's greatest swordsman, the Wado Ichimonji will have served its purpose, and I think that Zoro will want to return it to Kuina, to allow her to rest in peace with her spiritual contribution to taking the title. Although we do have some unfinished business in Shimotsuki Village. Before depositing the sword in the sword bank, Zoro should probably settle the score with down D stairs once and for all, because Mihawk was never the greatest challenge that a swordsman could face. These stairs claimed the life of the most talented sword wielder this world has ever known, and they need to pay. And you know, all of this is well and good in theory. However, the problem is there's no real telling the first thing that Zoro is going to do, because no matter what he decides, it's all entirely subject to whether or not he gets lost along the way. And I can see a future where Zoro spends the rest of his life trying to find his way back to Shimotsuki Village to visit Kuina's grave. Imagine this. Zoro's very last panel in One Piece is him setting out to go home, but then stopping and saying, "Now which way was it again?" And then going in the complete opposite direction and ending up in West Blue or something. Although if the dawn of the world happens as we now anticipate, and the ocean height drops to pre-Void Century levels, then Zoro could become a very stereotypical wandering samurai. Because he won't have to rely on being on a ship, he'll be able to walk from place to place to place with his leg to leg to leg, which doesn't fix his sense of direction, but it does give him a lot more options to get lost. Kind of like the land equivalent of Mihawk floating around the Grand Line in his coffin boat, except that Zoro's sense of direction is so unpredictable that he becomes known as this legendary natural disaster, living out a life of attempting to perform mundane activities, but causing huge problems wherever he goes. Like on Sabadi when Zoro wanted to go fishing but got on the wrong ship, so he cut the whole thing and ended the dreams and careers of an entire pirate crew. And to his credit, Zoro would remain the world's greatest swordsman for the rest of his life, primarily because no one can find him to challenge him. And eventually Zoro's name could fall into myth because almost no one remains who can confirm that he ever actually existed. And then at the age of 70, 80, maybe even 90, Zoro accidentally finds his way back to Shimotsuki Village to visit Kuina's grave and makes a heavily understated apology, saying something like, "Sorry I'm a bit late, got a little bit lost along the way. And I got busy trying to innovate some sweet, sweet award-winning flavor, but unfortunately I was beaten to the patent by the sponsor of this video, Fume, which is one of these magnificent flavor things, which you can wield Itoryu, you could wield it Nitoryu, or if you're a bit of a boss, you can even go Shantoryu. And let's be clear, Fume is not a vape. There's no vapor, no nicotine, no batteries, just glorious flavored air. In fact, you're breathing air right now, aren't you, you filthy air breather? I bet it's not even flavored. No orange vanilla for you, sir. But it could be. There is so much more you could be having, as well as many other flavors such as the Spearmint Ice Core, to provide a refreshing jolt before, during, and after your long day of watching men talk about fictional pirates on the internet. Fume have served over 300,000 customers, and you can be another by using my link in the description. And for a limited time, use my code GrandLineReview to get your free topper. It's the perfect accessory for any Fume device. You know, slip it on the mouthpiece for a softer, warmer feel. It's also chewable for those who love to fidget, which is me, and it's reusable. So head to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use code GrandLineReview or scan the QR code on screen to get your free Fume topper when you order your journey pack today. And thank you so much to Fume, because their sponsorship allows us to bring you the best fictional pirate content possible Metal as often as possible. And also, I just generally love fiddling with them. So try them out, but for now, it's back to you, me. That may not be Zoro's endgame, because it's also possible that he takes up residence on Wano. Wano is definitely an island that suits Zoro's elected lifestyle. Having been brought up in a Wano colony, he just gets the culture. He's very comfortable, and due to his status as a hero, I'm sure that he'll have endless alcohol granted to him and drink the country dry. So I posed this question to all of you in a community post. I said, what is Zoro going to do after he becomes the world's greatest swordsman? And one of the main responses I got was, go to Wano and get some cheeks. And this same user then felt the need to clarify, Hiyori cheeks. And I agree with that clarification. Zoro can't just renounce his piracy, become a booty hunter, and source Wano cheeks indiscriminately, because he'd be very likely to end up with Kinemon. But we should talk about the potential coupling with Hiyori. In my opinion, the only time that the topic of shipping is worth talking about in One Piece is when we're talking about the very end of the series. Because Eiichiro Oda goes to great lengths to avoid substantive romance in One Piece, as do most shonen authors. However, there is a bit of a trend at the end of long-running shonen series to have a lot of the established characters pair off to live happily ever after and such. And we have seen the seeds of many Straw Hat couplings in the New World era. The other key one being Chopper and Milky, which will almost certainly be a thing. And as for Sanji, he has some options with either Pudding or Viola. But we're not here to talk about Sanji, so strike that remark from the record. And you know, I'd actually forgotten about this, but going back on Wano, there's a scene where Hiyori takes credit for cleaning Zoro while he was asleep for a week, and then proceeded to ask Zoro if that thought was exciting for him. Hiyori very clearly has a thing for moss men, and all that's currently missing is Zoro's interest. But Hiyori is very likely the reason why Zoro will travel back to Wano even if he's not interested in her. Hiyori was the one who convinced Zoro to part with Shusui by explaining that it was a national treasure and the need for it to be returned to its rightful place. And so, in exchange, she offered her father's sword Enma. And if Zoro no longer sees the need to get stronger, which is a big if that we'll talk about in a bit, but it's not out of the question to imagine him returning Enma to the Kozuki clan or laying it to rest at Odin's shrine, just as Shusui guards Ryuma's grave. Speaking of Ryuma's grave, one of the reasons why I think Zoro absolutely needs to return to Wano is because he asked Hiyori to visit Ryuma's grave, which he never did, because he was asleep for a week, and by the time he woke up, there was no time for sword tourism. But this could also fall into a long list of things that people said they do on Wano, but just never did. Like how Luffy said that they would have Jinbei's crew toast together after defeating the Kaido. And to this very day, Jinbei is still awkwardly waiting for that promise to be fulfilled, just standing there in the background going, hey guys, you remember the thing? But there's a very good reason for Zoro to end up back on Wano, at least temporarily. And you know, if a bit of a thing did happen with Hiyori, then Zoro would end up with Denjiro as his weird stepfather-in-law. Alternatively, have you ever considered the following? Zoro isn't too different from a genie. You rub the magic sake bottle, out pops a Zoro, and he proceeds to dedicate his life to making your wish come true, whether that be Kuina's dream of becoming the world's greatest swordsman, or Luffy's dream of becoming the Pirate King. He's a very helpful genie, and there is a third dream in close proximity to Zoro that he may decide to pursue next. There is one dream that almost certainly will not be completed by the time that One Piece is over, which is Tashigi's dream of taking charge of all the Meito blades so that they can't be used by evil people, because Tashigi empathizes with swords more readily than she's capable of empathizing with most humans. Which isn't as ridiculous as it sounds, because in One Piece, certain objects do have wills and personas of their own. Several swords have displayed their own unique personalities, but also think of something like the Going Merry. Tashigi believes that blades in the hands of ne'er-do-wells are crying for liberation, and that she is going to be the joy boy of the sharp metal world. So Tashigi's dream is to acquire the 7 supreme grade blades, then the 21 great grades, and the 50 skillful grades. So she needs to acquire 83 renowned metals in the hands of exceptionally skilled and powerful wielders. That is not going to be a quick or an easy task. And like Luffy becoming the Pirate King, it's not something that she can do alone. And given that at this point, Zoro has already made Kuina's dream come true, it feels only right to make other Kuina's dream come true as well. And you know, Zoro and Tashigi's fight against Monet established that they aren't a terrible team. They have a very fun comedic dynamic after Punk Hazard, which significantly de-escalated the tension. And I've always loved that it was Tashigi who delivered the final blow to Monet, because it showed that Tashigi is a very reasonable, logical person, and those qualities make up for the colossal gaps in Zoro's brain matter. Zoro needs, maybe not Tashigi herself, but someone like Tashigi at the very least. On the crew, we have characters like Nami and Sanji that fill those logic gaps for him. And during the time skip, that person was Perona. So after the Straw Hats have disbanded, if Zoro's going to do anything of substance with the remainder of his life, he's going to need a new person to fulfill that role. And Zoro may even feel indebted to Tashigi for guiding him to the Sandai Kitetsu. And by the end of One Piece, he may even be able to empathize with her feelings towards swords and their feelings towards whatever they have feelings for. Given that Zoro has gradually been experiencing the increasingly dominant personalities of his own assorted pieces of sharp metal. And so he becomes known as Meito Hunter Zoro, the completionist of the One Piece world, just without the charity scandals. At this point, Zoro has beaten the final boss and finished the game. However, he now goes on a quest to 100% the game, establishing his dominance by challenging every user of a Meito blade and collecting them after if he wins. Meanwhile, Tashigi can be kind of like his Navi, saying, hey, listen, it'll be great fun. Because the end of One Piece doesn't just mean the end of the story, it also coincides with the end of an era for this planet and the beginning of another. Things are going to be very different in almost every way imaginable. The landscape of the planet itself will change, the political systems will radically shift, and we may very well enter a world that no longer has need for either pirates or marines, which means that there's no legal or ideological barrier stopping a Zoro Tashigi team. Although it probably wouldn't be a romantic dynamic. Hey, you look exactly like my dead best friend, wanna bang, is probably not gonna go down as well as Zoro wants her to go down. And I do think it's a little bit weird. The idea that every time you look at your partner, you're actually seeing a different person. But if Zoro and Tashigi did end up together, and it's not completely off the table, at least we know what her wedding dress would look like, thanks to the One Piece collaboration with Placol. Now, here's a crack idea. A consistent thread within Zoro's life is the issue of gender. Kuina brought it up to him when she expressed concern that it was impossible for a woman to become the world's best. And this thread persisted into Tashigi, who has, on multiple occasions, accused Zoro of not taking fights seriously because his opponent was a woman, whether it be Tashigi herself or Monet. So here's the idea, right? Zoro, he's sick of all of this gender whinging, so he rocks up to Emporio Ivankov and he says, yo, magic fingers, hit me with some sweet, sweet estrogen and turn me into a woman. After which point, Zoro sets out to prove once and for all that the world's greatest swordsman can be a woman, which is a stupid idea. I know it'll never happen, but the issue of a woman's competency in the realm of swordplay is one of the recurring themes of Zoro's character. And Kuina being dead alongside Tashigi constantly feeling inadequate in Zoro's presence aren't really proving Zoro's point correct, because in the end, he, a man, will become the world's greatest. So to really hammer that point home that he made to Kuina as a child, he could start this run again with woman mode activated and prove the point once and for all. That, or he can go down the Silvers Ray Lee path of becoming a mentor figure, perhaps even taking on S-Hawk as an apprentice. It's really hard to see Zoro being the teacher of his own dojo or something. However, I could see him falling into a mentor role if his students keep supplying him with alcohol in exchange for lessons. It would probably be more in line with Zoro's interest to open a bar rather than a dojo, although he'd be constantly drinking himself out of business, which I suppose is a very Rayleigh-like maneuver, and Zoro has to find increasingly embarrassing ways to earn money, which means there may be some truth to the bad timeline outcome of him becoming a beggar, because that is the kind of semi-squalor that Silvers Ray Lee now lives in, an endless cycle of gambling then selling himself into slavery to pay the debts. It should be noted that Zoro already has disciples out there in the world. During the second From the Decks of the World cover story, we checked in with Shimotsuki Village, and all of the kids there had decided to adopt three-sword style, and even taped their left eyes closed to emulate Zoro's one-eye vision. And if they emulate his dream as well, then these kids could set sail in the hopes of challenging Zoro and becoming the next world's greatest swordsman. Again, good luck finding him though. But I also think that we might be taking Zoro's ambition for granted here. After taking the title, getting drunk, and taking a nap, Zoro is probably going to get right back into training to keep the title, knowing that someone will always be around the corner to try and take it from him. And Zoro may even aim to hold onto the title for his entire life in order to preserve Kuina's dream as long as possible. But also, beating the world's greatest swordsman doesn't mean that you've personally hit your ceiling. When Oda revealed the good timeline Zoro at ages 14-60, he'd gone on to successfully innovate 4-sword style and even 5-sword style. I really don't think that Zoro is going to stop pushing himself just because he got a title. It just means that he needs to set his sights even higher. And here's the thing about that. Even the title of World's Greatest Swordsman starts to feel very small in the grand scheme of One Piece. A series where we have confirmed that aliens exist. They live among us on the planet right now, and they are plentiful to be found on the various moons confirmed to exist in outer space, let alone the potential for other planets. And we do have confirmation of some incredibly bizarre and advanced races in outer space who do fight, admittedly not with swords that we've seen, but similar pokey kind of weapons, enough to give Zoro a challenge, I'd say. And if Zoro ever learns that aliens exist and that space travel is possible, he may even set his sights here and aim to become the greatest swordsman in the universe, thus setting the stage for the One Piece spin-off titled Lost in Space, or maybe something else because it's already a thing. But you get the idea. That this is Zoro. Subscribe to the channel, consistent injections, etc. See you in the next video. Goodbye. And thanks so much again to Fume for sponsoring this video, and please do check them out through the link in the description.